Hey guys, Emily Muchanti here, and I'm back with a video for my new reading intervention teachers. Today, we are going to talk about specifically the program Phonics for Reading and something that you can do to enhance or embellish or make this program a little more engaging because it's amazing, but I want to give you some tools that you can work with. First, I want to tell you about a couple of things. Yesterday, I was at the Idaho State Capitol and I got to listen in on Emily Hanford talking about all of the great things that she's learned about the science of reading through her reporting and through her most recent project, Sold a Story. If you've never listened to Sold a Story, I'm going to drop the link down below in the show notes so that you can listen to it. Amazing. It will give you such a broad view about really kind of what's happened in the reading field over about the last 50, 60 years and how we've landed where we are inside of the science of reading movement, which is about time, right? So that will be there. Also want to encourage you. That was really a treat. I was so excited to actually get a chance to meet her. I've got a picture. You can follow me on Instagram at ReadingDiva06 to see that, and that will be kind of fun. Another thing I want to tell you about before we get into today's talk is that last month we did a reading intervention Q&A for anyone who wanted to pop in for an hour and ask questions, chat, talk about what they're doing in their intervention programs. It was really successful. I was super happy to see everybody there. And so our next one is going to be Sunday, October 22nd, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. I will also drop a free registration link in the notes below, and I hope you'll join me there. Okay, so let me talk to you. I've got an itchy hair here somewhere. I want to talk to you a little bit about Phonics for Reading today. So a couple of my amazing intervention clients that I am coaching are using Phonics for Reading. It is something that I have used for several years with great success. I really love what the program can do. This is a program, if you're not familiar, it was created by Dr. Anita Archer, and she can do no wrong in my book. But any kind of a scripted program can be a little bit challenging for somebody who's kind of new to the field. And I know that we hear the word fidelity kind of crammed down our throat, fidelity to the program. And I want to give you some permission to think a little bit outside of that fidelity box, in that when we're looking at programs, scripted programs, direct instruction programs, in my mind, we are giving the script so that we can follow the direct instruction protocols that are in there and we don't miss any of the important needs and instruction that the student really requires. But what that can also come off as is really a little bit dry or callous, slow and boring. And we don't want that, because there are some amazing programs out there that when we can kind of get some permission to take it on ourselves, they have amazing pieces to them. Okay, so that being said, what I want to do is show you a Phonics for Reading lesson and kind of walk you through some ideas on what you can do and tell you just, again, my opinion, what I have done in the past. Take from it what you want, do with it what you will. But I'm going to share my screen and do some talking points and give you some ideas if you are using Phonics for Reading in particular. So let me do that now. Okay, so here is the first lesson from, I believe this is level 3 of Phonics for Reading, and I want to walk you through the components of it. I'm not even looking at the teacher's edition right now. I have used this for several years. Most of it I kind of know, it's laid out in my head, but please, you are welcome to compare that as if you have that. But let me show you kind of what the components are if this is new to you. At the beginning of a lesson, there will usually be either a new sound that's introduced or the sound that has another 2 or 3 lessons that they are going to provide extra practice and exposure using different words. So in this lesson, you can see that there is the sound of long A using the vowel digraphs AI and AY. And then what happens is everything is broken down into sections. So section A is showing us the words that contain those phonics patterns. The pattern is highlighted and a new word is presented. Then what you see is a list of sentences here that are just kind of building some additional fluency. They may or may not include some of the words, or actually I think they all do include the patterned words here. Then there is a review words section, and these are just words that should have been used or taught in previous lessons, followed by this section here, C, which is showing some of these words with the inflectional endings that are added. And then we go into a challenge words section where you are looking again at these patterns, but they are added to multisyllabic words or more challenging words, and it breaks down this pattern of that looping strategy that is also introduced in Anita Archer's rewards program, followed by some sight words that the kids are going to see in some passages that they're reading. And then here is a decodable passage. And the decodable passage you can see it gives us the opportunity to do some timing and some fluency practice. The words are broken or are added into this story. And on the right is a picture that the student is eventually going to put which part of the story goes with that picture. So kind of a quick little comprehension check. Then what you see here is a spelling component. So the students are practicing their encoding of the word, followed by some independent practice, which this how I used it as independent practice, where the students are reading a sentence and choosing the best answer for the final to finish the sentence. And then finally, the last section is again another practice activity where they're using those words, connecting it, choosing a sentence that matches the picture again for a comprehension check. And then that is the entire lesson. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what I do and how I used this particular program. Once I got sure on what the components were and how that scripting was laid out and what it suggested I focus on, I didn't use the teacher's edition any longer. I just had another student book and I ran through it this way. So a couple of suggestions, because if you've done this, the direct instruction is meant to start with you introducing the new sound. And so what I would do is introduce this new sound on a whiteboard, and I would show the students that and explain that today we're going to learn the spelling, 2 new spellings for the long vowel sound of A, and those are with the AI that says A and the AY that says A. And I would explain that usually that AI combination is the spelling pattern that we would use when we hear that sound in the middle of a word, and the AY sound is the sound that we would use when we hear that sound at the end of the word. And so I would have this on the board. I would just introduce it there. Students would also have white dry erase boards so that they could work on. And so we would spell these words out. They would underline the AI saying AI. When I got to section A, what we would do is set our whiteboards down. And these are routines that I have built into my small groups. And so kids understood this. So I'm going to kind of expedite this, but understand that all of these are routines that the students need to learn and master. But what I would teach them is put your finger under the vowel sound. We're going to say the vowel sound, and then we're going to say the word. So it would go A, fail, A, day, A, may. And this may be something that I would say, okay, now let's do it again quickly, just reading the words. Fail, day, may. And we would do that again. A, wait, I, wit, which it's drawing in something just to practice. So we have some spiral review. And again, we would then read for fluency. Wait, wit, tail. Then what I would do is after we've gone through this together, usually either echo reading this or choral reading this, depending on the needs of my student, I would say, now what I would like you to do is read lines 1 through 6 on your own for fluency. Give me a thumbs up when you have it. And so the students, I would be monitoring, hearing either whisper reading or silent reading, and checking on them for that. And then I might add a little competition piece to this, because one thing that I found that is really important in this program is that you have to keep your pacing. Anita says, perky pace, use a perky pace. When things are dry like this, I always explain to students, this is important practice we need. We're going to go through it quickly, so let's stay with me. And what that did was it allowed my students to stay with me. And when we're going pretty quickly, they are not engaged in any misbehaviors or downtime. That's really important. No downtime here. And so we would continue through this. I might say, okay, let's see if you can read all of these words in 20 seconds. And I would have a stopwatch and I would time them. And so again, I did this as a way to keep the students engaged in the pacing of this. So we would also do something similar with the sentences. I would have them underline our targeted sound or highlight those sounds. We would read them either chorally, or I would time them, letting them know that we're trying to have them compete with themselves. So highlighters and stopwatches for phonics for reading and dry erase boards, I think, are really important. Those are the tools that you should really have with you all the time for any kind of lesson you're doing. When we went to the review section, again, I might ask them, read the first line to yourself, give me a thumbs up when you're ready to read it together, and then we would chorally read them. It's just providing the repetition. When we came into the word endings, for example, I would explain that with ED says it has 3 different sounds. Sometimes it sounds like ed, as in failed, actually as in failed. Here it says ed as in waited, sailed, trapped. Sometimes it also makes a T sound at the end. And so we would practice reading these words. And so we're not just reading them one time. The repetition in the reading is what's important for fluency. And so I would go through that, whether I'm timing them, having them read it silently, giving me a thumbs up. I might have them take their highlighters and highlight the endings that sound like D or T. Give them something that they have to practice and give them some accountability. When we got to the challenge words, this is an important routine that I think is great to teach your students when we're doing any kind of multisyllabic word reading. And the first concept that kids have to know is that every syllable must have a vowel sound. And so what I would do is say, take your highlighter or your pencil, and we are going to underline the vowel sounds that are in this word. And I can see here that I have 2 vowel sounds. Therefore, I know I'm going to have 2 syllables, which is why I have 2 loops. And then we teach them that these big words are just smaller words that we have to decode and put together. And so I would have them read this with me then. We know that AI says A, O says ah here. So we have rain drop. And then again, I would underline the vowel sounds. How many vowel sounds do I have? 2. Therefore, I have 2 syllables. So I am going to read this word as mail box. I and A, midday, A and A, rail way. And so this is an important routine for students to develop that ability to read and decode multisyllabic words. Sight words, this is just an opportunity to read them. I might put the stopwatch on and say, okay, let's see if you can read each of these sight words in 10 seconds. You'll have to play with this to know what the appropriate timing is, and give me a thumbs up if you're done before the timer hits. Or you could have them read them, whisper read them, and you're checking for their accuracy, correcting, providing any corrective feedback as needed. So the next thing we would do is get to the section that is the fluency component. And you can do this a couple of ways. You can do this with a cold read if you would like. You can include a chart where you're going to actually have a chart in the student's folder and they can record their progress here. You can teach them to partner read together depending on the age. You might check them at the end of the week and do the charting with them, or you don't need to chart at all. The important part of this is the repetition of the reading aloud. And so when you're doing this, again, there are a number of ways to do it. If I were doing a cold read, I would have the students, I would time them, have them mark where they were at the end of 1 minute. And then I would say, okay, great. We've got our first cold read. We're going to have our first bracket. Now I want you to listen as I read this, and we're going to chorally read it together. We would, of course, go over any vocabulary or words that needed some additional support. And I would then say, now it's your turn to practice this paragraph on your own. So you're going to read it to yourself. We're going to go through and look for the paragraph or the picture that would match with that paragraph so that you have a little bit of an accountability. And I would do that for each of these paragraphs, giving them an opportunity to read it on their own. Maybe they partner read it. Again, I mix it up. Novelty is kind of important. The pacing is really important. But what I didn't do once I understood what was in the teacher's edition is I didn't just keep going back and looking at my teacher's edition. That kind of slowed the groove of the whole thing. And then I would say either the same day at the end or the next day, we're going to read this again. I'm going to time you. I want you to put your bracket where you end on the next time. Now, remember, it's the repetition of the reading that is so important. What if kids get a word wrong, or they are saying, well, I got way down here when I really only got here? You kind of have to, pick your battles on some of this stuff. One thing I like, and this came from Readsters with Linda Farrell, I believe, who talks about reading for accuracy first when you're doing any kind of repeated reading. And so making sure that the students have the accuracy down. And so maybe you're doing that one-on-one with a student. Again, I just want to give you some options right now. This is a truly quick idea of what you could do with it. So then as we move through the lesson, the spelling, and in the teacher's edition, it would select the words for you. It would also provide a sentence dictation. But if you're not using the teacher's edition, you could go up and choose your words from here. I would definitely, as part of a routine for spelling, teach my students the tapping, mapping, graphing kind of routine. We're going to tap the sound. So if the word was, let's say, I got to find one. Let's say the word was play. I would teach the students to tap it. Play, p, l, a. Okay, I hear 3 sounds. How do I write each of those sounds? And I would do that. P, and then A, we know it's the digraph, and it's the digraph at the end of the word. What did we learn? Which spelling do we use? And so we would do it this way. And you could even have them do lines for their sounds first if you would like. But this is, again, bringing in some of that encoding component of this lesson, which is really important. When I got to this section here, this is an opportunity for my students to work independently, and so that I can check in. And kids are they're going to complete this at different paces. So for my early finishers, I would go through and check it for accuracy. And then I would give my students highlighters, and I would say, okay, while the others are finishing up in the group, or the if I'm working with somebody specifically, I would say, I want you to go in and with your yellow highlighter, I want you to highlight any words that have the A sound spelled AI in the middle of the word. And so they have to go A, okay, A, and they would highlight everything so that they are. But what's important here is, and I tell them this, don't just look for the spelling of AI, because the word said SAID, AI in that word does not say A. So you train them and you hold them accountable, giving them some opportunities to work with as early finishers to elaborate on their learning through that. And I would do the same thing here. And then when I had everybody done, the lesson typically for me took 2 days. And I had them for 30 minutes a lesson, but I usually did an additional warm up in the beginning, maybe whether it was a phonemic awareness warm up or it was a fluency warm up, it would depend. But those are some ways that I embellished this particular program. I kept the pace perky. I gave my students other things to do with it that was still attached to the objective of the lesson, which is to master that AI and AY decoding and spelling. And I love this as a program. I really do. I think it's a great resource. And I know that when I'm coaching, and I was coaching my clients this week, and they were like, okay, this is, if you go through the teacher's edition, it's very dry and very boring, and the kids get lost. And so it's about giving yourself permission to embellish and keeping to the scope and sequence of the program, but sticking to best practices. And getting something that's really dry and boring isn't best practice. Another thing that you can do with your students, if they're like, you could say, listen, we have an issue that we're going to work on. My job is to help you be a better reader. And I can do that by working on some of these skills. So I promise you, I'm going to prove to you that at the end of this, you're going to be better. And how do you prove that? You prove it by that progress monitoring of the oral reading fluency, and they can see I'm growing, and this is how they're going to grow. Sometimes kids are really used to being entertained and having the teacher do a lot of tap dancing and a lot of inquiry kinds of instruction, discovery instruction. And those things are appropriate in certain places. But when we have kids that are significantly behind and they need some really direct instruction types of foundation, we have to know what to do to keep them engaged, because when they're engaged, they're going to have their attention. When you have their attention, they're going to actually learn the content, and that's what we want to do. So Phonics for Reading, in my opinion, is an amazing program. I think it is founded in great pedagogy, but you might need to embellish and add just for yourself to feel engaged and to keep your students engaged. I hope this was helpful. I know it's quick. Obviously it's not easy to give you all of this. If we were at a table together, I would walk you through it all, but I hope that gave you some ideas. Again, Sunday, October 22nd is going to be an intervention Q&A open to anybody. The link is down below. If you're catching this video after that date, I hope you'll check out my website, emilymuchanti.com, and see what is coming up at that time, or booking a discovery call with me so that we can chat about what you're doing and see if I can be of service to you. Thank you for what you do as always, and bye for now.